But no, God gives us something. All of us. No matter how rich you are, no matter how poor you are, you have something. You start off with something. All of us do at the beginning of every day. Now, depending on when you get up, some of us have less of it to begin with. Yeah, the earlier you get up, the more of it you have. The later you get up, the less of it you have. You know what I'm talking about. Right? What do we have that we all start off with every day? Time. Yeah. Time. So that is my little introduction. But Jesus, he had some important things to say when he was giving this parable. This parable. So look back again at your scripture reading, Luke 19, 11 and 12. And we're just going to scratch the surface. You know, the time that we get to spend together is just scratching the surface. The time that you get to spend with God, that's where you get to dig deeper. Okay? So Luke 19. Luke 19. Actually, we'll start with verse 9. Jesus' final words to Zacchaeus and those who were witnessing this contact, this change in this man as a result of being with Jesus. Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." While they were listening to this, he went on to tell them a parable. Because he was near Jerusalem, and the people thought that the kingdom of God was going to appear at once, he said, "A man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king, and then to return." So that's the beginning. Now, if you look at it in the Old King James, it says here in verse 12, "He said, therefore, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom, and to return." You know, so he wasn't going to just receive a kingdom and stay there living it up as a king. He was going to receive the kingdom and then come back. And the parable begins with the reasons for this parable. There are two becauses. All right? Because his proximity to Jerusalem. Something was going to happen to him in Jerusalem, and he wanted to get this parable out because something was contained, a nugget was contained within this that people needed to be aware of. And the other because was that they, the witnesses, his audience, thought that the kingdom of God should immediately appear. That something great is associated with Jesus. The kingdom is associated with him, and because of him, it should happen any time now. We're going to be a part of it. The idea that it was all going to come to an end, the Roman occupation, everything. Jesus was going to set up his kingdom, and it was all going to change, all going to be better. Now, isn't that what people are thinking of regarding September 23rd? Wait, that's today. There's been a lot of buzz in the news, in the media, in religious circles around September 23, which is today. I do notice people are missing, but that's because their women's retreat. They haven't been raptured. Yeah, okay, yeah. But no, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. I mean, that's a lot of study, a lot of time, and a lot of hype on some Bible prophecies that are compelling. Now, if it challenges people to get into the Word themselves, then maybe that's a good thing. But if all they're getting is the hype and the excitement of a date that has been set for the beginning of the end, well, we're already in the time of the end. That began in 1844. If you're going to look at Bible prophecy, but we're looking at this parable. People are going to be into this compelling story, but that's the danger. It's a compelling story of the end, weaving just enough Bible truth with a few seeds of error to stimulate slightly educated minds with Bible language of long ago, soaked in private interpretation. Jesus did tell them back in Luke 18, 30 to 33, he told them, and it was like it fell on deaf ears. All right? He said here, Jesus took the 12 aside and told them, we are going up to Jerusalem, and everything that is written by the prophets about the Son of Man will be fulfilled. He will be delivered over to the Gentiles. They will mock him, insult him, and spit on him. They will flog him and kill him, and on the third day he will rise again. And it says in verse 34, the disciples did not understand any of this. Its meaning was hidden from them, and they did not know what he was talking about. But now, the people who heard him say these things were in danger of making him a king for that day, a king for that time. Now not realizing he's going to Jerusalem not to wear a kingly crown, but to wear a crown of thorns. Not to mock the present government, but to be mocked by it. And not to occupy a throne, but to occupy a cross. So here's the parable. Here's the parable. And we'll kind of weave into it the reading of both versions, the New International and also the King James. So he said, a man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then to return. So this nobleman, this person who was going to receive a kingdom and then return. It sounds like Jesus Christ. The far country or the kingdom, who is he receiving it for? Who is he going to offer it to? Right? He's always been about offering the kingdom of heaven to us, to offer it to people. And he's returning. He's coming again. So he calls his 10 servants together and gave them 10 minas, or 10 pounds. Put this money to work, he said, until I come back. Those are his instructions. So who is it? Who are his servants? His disciples? Who else could they be? They could be us, his followers. In King James it says, occupy. I want you to occupy till I return. To carry on. That means to carry on the business of a banker or a trader. Use the talents that have been given. Now, they weren't each given 10. All 10 of them were given 1 apiece. This is what you... And this is the observation that I got. All of the servants were given the same amount. Just like all of us are given the same amount of time in the day. But all of us do spend that time differently. Right? All of us spend it differently. And at some point in the future, we'll all be called to account for how we spend it. Now, the citizens, this is verse 14, his subjects, the citizens hated him and sent a delegation after him to say, we don't want this man to be our king. Now, if you're a servant, and you're dealing with subjects who don't want this nobleman, who don't want this man of high birth to be their king, how difficult is it going to be to bank and trade with those who won't acknowledge your king? Right? It's going to be challenging. You have stuff that has been given to you to share, and of course to invest, you have to give up some of your money in order for the hope of a return. Now, there was a small amount of money I put into a bank account. And I didn't realize there was a fine print that said you had to have a minimum balance. And that balance fell below the minimum. And guess what happened to what was left in there? It was gone. It didn't gain interest, it was used for interest for somebody else. Fortunately, it wasn't much. I mean, that's why it was taken. It wasn't much. Now, I often hear that North Dakota is a tough place to share the gospel. You know, I go outside of North Dakota and I speak with other pastors and they say, oh, you're in North Dakota? What a tough place to share the gospel. What a tough place. Nevertheless, reading between the lines in this parable, there was some success gained by the trading of those pounds, the trading of the currency that the nobleman left his servants with. They received some success. So they gained by occupying the time, by spending their resources, banking, trading, negotiating, talking, sharing. Remember, they were spending resources that didn't belong to them. They were representatives of the nobleman, spending stuff on his behalf, trying to gain more. So, being here in North Dakota, sharing the gospel, it can't be any harder than what these guys experienced. You know, trying to bank and trade with citizens who didn't like their nobleman. Verse 15. He was made king, or he gained the kingdom, and he returned home. Then he sent for the servants to whom he had given the money, in order to find out what they had gained with it. The first one came and said, "Sir, your mina, your pound, has earned 10 more." "Well done, my good servant," his master replied. "Because you have been trustworthy in a very small matter, take charge of 10 cities." Now, I had to try to wrap my imagination around this one. You've been given 1 pound apiece, 1 mina for each of them. And the master comes back, having obtained the kingdom, so now he's king. And he's calling his servants together. You know, he's each given them, they've all been given the same amount to start off with. And he calls for the first one. He says, "Your pound has gained 10. Wow, good job. You have authority over 10 cities. Remember, he has a kingdom now. All right? He's got control of a nation. How many towns and cities are in the great nation of the United States? I mean, too many to count. But this guy, who's been given just 1 pound of currency, now has authority over 10 cities. You know, name 10 cities that you'd like to have authority over. Well, Pastor, today, none. I mean, they're rough places, but look at what we're talking about here. He's been given authority for 10 cities because his 1 pound that he was given, he gained 10 more by banking and trading on behalf of the king, using the name of the king. Okay? "Well done, thou good servant, because you have been faithful in very little, have thou authority over 10 cities. 10 cities. Revelation 2 verse 10 says, "Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life." The difference between being faithful in the small things of life here versus the crown of life received when Jesus returns is vast and incalculable. You can't compare the two. Us being faithful with our little lives here, with God's help, because we're using God's time, God's talent, God's abilities that He's given to us, that's in the scope of eternity, what is that? And when Jesus comes again, look at all this stuff I'm going to give you. All because in a few seconds I gave you here, you gained so much more. Now the second king, verse 18, saying, "Lord, thy pound hath gained 5 pounds. And he said likewise to him, Be thou also over 5 cities. Again, this huge, out of proportion reward. 1 pound gained 5. Here, have 5 towns. Have 5 cities. I'll make you responsible for 5 cities. A similar reward, so far out of proportion. But again, that picture painted that when we are faithful in our little corner, where we trust God with what He's given to us, He wants to trust us with so much more in eternity. Now we get to another servant. It says here, another servant. How many servants were there that he started off with? 10. And now we get to first, second, And the third one isn't numbered the third. It said another. Another. And he said, behold, here is thy pound, which I have kept laid up in a napkin. In the New International it says, here is your mina. I have kept it laid away in a piece of cloth. I was afraid of you because you are hard man, austere. You take out what you did not put in and reap what you did not sow. He was afraid to trade it. He was afraid to even take it to the bank. Well, maybe that he was afraid it would have happened to what happened to my money. It would have disappeared completely. He was afraid to trade it, especially among citizens. Remember how vocal they were about how against the nobleman they were? So we don't want this man to rule over us. And it's among these kinds of people that the servants were amongst, trying to multiply the stuff that the master had entrusted them with. So he thought it was wise to keep it hidden. And so when you keep it hidden, and you're not using it, you're not trading with it, in what manner are you living if you're not banking and trading with the king's currency? You're living like one of the citizens. It's too awkward to stand out amongst everybody else who hates the king. So I'm just going to hide this little, I'm going to... in fact, he put it in a cloth. Under the guise of protecting it, he was hiding it so nobody could see it. So nobody would mistake him for being a subject, for being in the king's employ. He wanted to look like one of the citizens. And so he joined them in cursing the nobleman and saying how bad the nobleman was and how he misappropriated funds while he's all the while holding on to one he's not showing. He's not showing his hand. He's keeping it hidden. Now, of course, another way to look at that, at least he wasn't at risk of losing it. Right? So he's playing both sides in his mind. I'm going to live like one of the citizens so I don't stand out, but at the same time, I've got a hold of it so that I can gain at least something when the king returns. Nothing was happening. He wasn't occupying as the master told him to. He was being occupied by the citizens who cared not for the kingdom the nobleman was receiving, and as a result, he would have no part in the reward. And so the servant came and said, here is your mina. See, here it is. I have kept it laid away in a piece of cloth. And I was afraid of you because you are a hard man. You take out what you did not put in, you reap what you did not sow. His master replied, I will judge you by your own words, you wicked servant. You knew, did you, that I'm a hard man, taking out what I did not put in and reaping what I did not sow. Why then didn't you put my money on deposit, so that when I came back, I could have collected it with interest? You could have at least done that. Not laid it away. Right? Isn't in the good old days, your money was safer underneath your bed, right, than in the bank? Maybe that's the way it is today again. I don't know. Remember, I told you I lost a little bit that I had in the bank. Well, because I failed to read the fine print. But not so with Jesus. He wants us to use the resources that we've all been given. He wants us to use it. That we all have a story to tell. Sometimes we get ashamed of our story. We don't want to tell it. Why? Because it's awkward appearing different in front of everybody else. It's awkward. Even a gain of half a pound would have been something from someone who was fearful of his master. Even one little interest payment. You know, we have some money in a savings that if we want to get anything out of it, it takes a couple of days. You know, you've heard of those. And so slowly and painfully some few pennies get added to it. But do you realize this is what Jesus is talking about in this parable? Even if you took it out of, sorry about that, even if you took it out of the napkin and gave it to a banker, you would be admitting, I am a citizen, I am a servant of the Most High. This is His currency. Can you invest it for me? And even if it gained a penny, do you realize what a penny is in the kingdom of heaven? What a penny of interest is. Sure, 1 pound is at 10 pounds. He says it's equivalent to 10 cities. 5 pound, a gain of 5 pounds is equivalent to 5 cities. What would be a fraction of a pound? Could it be the gain of a home? The gain of a community? The gain of a family? And maybe the gain of one soul. Just one. If the Lord could use you to just gain one, an interest of one, that Jesus died for, that is a gain of an interest that is invaluable to Jesus because He paid His life for just that one. And if your life just gained one, that's how powerful it was. But to keep it laid up because you're afraid of losing it, when your life could be spent just gaining one. The servant would have been rewarded. Mustard seed faith. He was judged according to the view of the nobleman that he had adopted. What kind of view was that? You are a hard man, you're austere. I was afraid of losing it. So I didn't spend it. All those servants had spent time with Him. Just like the disciples had all spent time with Jesus. Yet one out of them all cultivated different ideas about Jesus and the kingdom. And just like us today. You know, the Bible is the most widely distributed book of all time. Its message is the same for all people, yet it is being used in different ways, and people are understanding God in ways He did not intend. Some people see God as hard and unyielding. Others see Him as loving and generous. And their behavior follows their belief. So how do you see God? How will you occupy till Jesus returns? Do you know that you already have the Master's currency that can be traded with others? Yeah, I gave you that punchline right at the very beginning. Just so you wouldn't forget. Time, talent, truth, the gospel. We're in possession of all this. But look at what happens at the end. He said to those, verse 24, standing by, take his mina away from him, give it to the one who has 10 minas. And it says here, sir, you're making an observation here, right? Isn't that what we as humans do when we think God is doing something a little off kilter? Sir, he already has 10. As if to imply, now, how is that fair? You've already given him 10 cities. Are you giving him another? How is that fair? The thing is, it's not about fair. 10 cities for 10 pounds, all gained from trading one. We're not talking about fair or what is deserved. We're talking about the generosity of God. He was treated. You know that famous quotation. He was treated as we deserve, so we could be treated as He deserves. There's no way we can talk about what's fair and not come out on the losing end when we consider what God has done for us. If we start throwing around the term fairness, well, guess what? It's fair for Him to destroy us. It's always been fair for Him to destroy us. The man who didn't trade, another servant. He was the man who chose to adopt the citizen's life of rejecting the nobleman's authority. He held on to the pound, that mina, as insurance, that should the nobleman return, he would at least gain some reward for keeping it safe. But you know what else the Bible says? You can't have two masters. Because what was he doing the whole time the master was away? Cursing him, swearing at him, living like one of the other citizens. Denying. You know, like what Peter did? He denied his master 3 times that he knew him. Fulfilling the very prophecy that God had told him. Before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times, Peter. And that's exactly what he did. This servant held on to that pound, that mina, and denied the very identity of the person who gave it to him. We can't have 2 masters. So his explanation, verse 26, he replied, I tell you, that to everyone who has, more will be given. But as for the one who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away. But those enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me. That was a graphic verse right there. And then verse 28. After he had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. The parable was a warning. The parable is a warning. A warning to the Pharisees that holding on to their little 1 pounds of legalism would gain them nothing, and what little they had would be taken away from them. The law that they prided themselves for keeping, yet preventing others from keeping, would be taken from them. The livelihood they enjoyed while oppressing others would be stripped from them. That message is contained in Luke 11, verse 52. It's also a warning to the people that soon they would be adopting the mantra. Remember what they said in response to Pilate regarding Jesus? Pilate who was trying to, well, not trying hard enough, but he said, I find no fault in this man. And what was one of their responses? They said, we have no king but Caesar. You remember that? Remember that as part of the gospel story? They said, we have no king but Caesar. And they had no idea that it would lead to death and suffering on such a scale that it caused Jesus to weep over the city. So you scan ahead, Luke 19, verse 41. It says here, Jesus, as he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. And said, if you, even you, had only known on this day, what would bring you peace. But now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you and encircle and hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another, because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you. Wow. These are the ones in the parable who said, we will not have you reign over us. It was a warning to the disciples. As long as they were trading with the Lord's currency, they would be ready to receive the reward their Lord would return with. Are you trading with the Lord's currency today? We've all been given time. How are we spending it? Are we spending it as citizens of the kingdom that's coming, or are we spending it as citizens of earth?